See that mic roll off of there? Did you see me catch that? Dude, I still got it. After all these years, I still got it. Where am I going to put it now? Okay, right there. All right, well, I wonder if you saw this news report a few years ago. Man 91 dies waiting for the will of God. Tupelo, Mississippi. Walter Houston, described by family members as a devoted Christian, died Monday after waiting 70 years for God to give him clear direction about what to do with his life. He hung around the house and prayed a lot, but just never got that confirmation, his wife Ruby says. Sometimes he thought he heard God's voice, but then he wouldn't be sure and he'd start the process all over again. Houston, she says, never really figured out what life was about, but felt content to pray continuously about what he might do for the Lord. Whenever he was about to take action, he would pull back because he didn't want to disappoint God or go against him in any way, Ruby says. He was very sensitive to always remaining in God's will. That was primary to him. Friends say they liked Walter, though he seemed not to capitalize on his talents. Walter had a number of skills he never got around to using, says longtime friend Timothy Burns. He worked very well with wood and had a storyteller side to him too. I always told him, take a risk, try something new if you're not happy. But he was too afraid of letting the Lord down. To his credit, they say, Houston, who worked mostly as a handyman, was able to pay off the mortgage on the couple's modest home. That story comes from this book by Kevin DeYoung, Just Do Something, A Liberating Approach to Finding God's Will, or, you probably can't read the rest of this subtitle, How to Make a Decision Without Dreams, Visions, Fleeces, Impressions, Open Doors, Random Bible Verses, Casting Lots, Liver Shivers, Writing in the Sky, etc. So he writes this about this story, this news report, Walter Houston. If you saw this report, then you must be a fan of larknews.com. Anybody ever been on there? Which has a funny, because it could be true, collection of fake Christian news. The story about Walter Houston is not real, but it is almost believable, isn't it? So anybody here, paralysis of analysis person like me? Anybody operate that way? So Jackson, where are you? Is he in here? How are you going to decide if you should go to Montana Tech or not? How are you going to know if that's God's will for you? Is Gavin here today? He's thinking about a business idea. How's he going to know if he should do that or when he should do that? How did you decide, John, that you were going to go to medical school? How did you know it was the will of God for you to become a doctor? Did you hear a voice from the heavens? Pastor Wayne, how did you know you should go to seminary and go into the pastorate? Mark and Mary, how did you know it was God's will for you to go to China? How will you know, young people, if it's God's will to marry so-and-so, such and such a person? So that's the question before us, and we have a very helpful passage of Scripture that's going to give us a framework for working our way through and making these kind of decisions in life. So it's Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verses 1 to 6. I'll give you a second to get there in your Bibles, and then I'm going to read all the verses together at one time here. When you're there, raise your hand. Most everybody? Pretty close? All right. Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 1. Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. Give a portion to 7 or even to 8, for you know not what disaster may happen on earth. If the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it will lie. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. As you do not know the way the Spirit comes to the bones in the womb of a woman with child, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. In the morning sow your seed, and at evening withhold not your hand, for you do not know which will prosper, this or that, or whether both alike will be good. So, two big picture principles here. 2 points here related to decision making. The first one is this: be generous. Cast your bread upon the waters. Any interesting verses, right, Dan? Dan and I were talking about this. So these have been just stuck in my head for a while. Now, I've been in my Bible a fair amount over the 22 plus years that I've been a Christian. I don't think I ever saw these verses. I've never heard a sermon about them. I've never heard anybody quote them. I mean, maybe I've been in left field for 50 years. I don't ever remember anybody just in conversation in life saying, you know, we have all kinds of Bible phrases that come down to us. The handwriting on the wall. I saw the handwriting on the wall, etc. Have you ever heard somebody say, hey, cast your bread on the waters? A few of you, I can never remember hearing that. I didn't know that verse was in the Bible till like a few weeks ago. Did you know that was in the Bible? Where have I been? How could I make it this far without knowing that? Well, interesting verses. There's a couple ways to take this. And if you have an NIV translation that's the newer 2011 NIV, you may have heard me read that and go, mine reads a little different. That reads like this: ship your grain across the sea. After many days, you may receive a return. Invest in 7 ventures, yes, in 8. You do not know what disaster may come upon the land. So if that's your only translation, you come away without thinking, oh, here's some good financial advice, right? Here's some business or investment advice. Hey, don't be afraid to take a risk. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. And diversify. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, because if something bad happens here, you're totally lost. So spread that out in a number of enterprises. Other translations, though, give what is a more literal rendering of the verse, which is just what I read before. This is the New American Standard. Cast your bread on the surface of the waters, for you will find it after many days. Divide your portion to 7 or even 8, for you do not know what misfortune may occur on the earth. Which the older commentators or preachers took as a call to generosity. Be generous with the things that you have. Don't be stingy with your money, with your possessions. What goes around comes around. What you sow, you will reap. So somewhere down the line, this liberality, this generosity, it will come back to you in some way. Understood that way, what these 2 verses are saying, verses 1 and 2, are a lot like what Proverbs 11 says. One gives freely, yet grows all the richer. Another withholds what he should give and only suffers want, only has lack. Stingy person lacks. Whoever brings blessing will be enriched, and whoever waters will himself be watered. Or 2 Corinthians 9, these verses might come to mind. The point is this: whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. God, who supplies seed to the sower, he's the supplier of everything, and bread for food, will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest of your righteousness. So I like to say about these verses, okay, we're stewards of God's resources. Nothing that we have, all of it's on loan. None of it is our own, ultimately. And the promise here is not, hey, if we're generous, God's going to increase our seed for stowing that we can gather up and heap up for ourselves. But if we cast our bread, God will increase our seed for more sowing, more liberality, more generosity for the sake of His kingdom. So you can take it two different ways, at least, and maybe more. The ambiguity is intentional. You know, these proverbs are meant to sort of rattle around in there, and you're like, you could take it that way, but you could also, there's this aspect of it, and you're supposed to kind of chew the cud, kind of mull that thing over. It should be bouncing around in your head as you go down the road during the week. Either way, though, the call here to venture out, to take some risk, to be generous, is given in light of this. The end of verse 2, you don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know what misfortune might fall. So, I don't know if we've mentioned this before in Ecclesiastes, but you are going to die. Here it is again. Like every week. Just want to remind you, you're going to die. And you can't take your stuff with you. You can't take it with you. So, cast the bread out there. Cast the bread on the waters. You never know where it's going to end up. Remember chapter 9, verse 12 from a couple weeks ago? You're just a little bluegill. We're all just little bluegills swimming in the pond, and we don't know when the net's going to scoop us up. Man does not know his time. Like fish that are taken in an evil net, and like birds caught in a snare, so the children of man are snared in an evil time when death suddenly falls upon them. If we cling to our bread, what happens to bread that is clung to? It's moldy, it's stale, and it crumbles. It eventually just falls through your hands and falls to the floor. So why hang on to it in tight-fisted fashion? So I went to the creek the other day, and I took the heels that were left in the loaf because my boys don't like the heels. I like the heels, and I tossed them in the creek. And I threw them like 4 pieces, all like down there in the same, and the creek's low. There's not a lot of current, but there's a little bit still. And I watch them. What's going to happen? And you know what happened? Some ended up here and some ended up there. Some just sort of went like this over this little side eddy, and there it was just a few feet away. And some kind of caught the main current, and down the creek it went, and it ended up over here, further way down. We don't know, as we sow, exactly maybe where this bread will end up, in whose hands, and what way God will use it, but we're called to this scattering, this generosity. You ever have those little boat races when you're a kid? You put like a stick or a piece of bark or a leaf in the creek, and you line up, and everybody, one, ready, set, go, and you see who's wins the race, gets down the creek the fastest, and they're going this way and that. So, Jeannie, Heidi told me you're reading the David Gibson Living Life Backwards. How have you found that? Has it been good? Yeah. I got a quote here. Maybe you'll remember this one. Let me put this on the screen. He says, "Here is wisdom you will not hear anywhere else. Take the best of what you have and the best of what you are and give them away. Hold them out in open hands to God and others. Worldly wisdom builds bunkers and barns to prepare for disaster. Biblical wisdom instead throws open the windows and doors of our homes and builds schools and hospitals and churches and sees rich Christians become much, much poorer than they might otherwise have been. Ecclesiastes-type wisdom, Christ-like wisdom, grows believers who spend their life on living in the world rather than on living in the world so as not to die. So take a risk. Of course, Jesus is the one who models this ultimately. He says, I'm the bread that came down from heaven. He says, I'm the bread of life. And so he, as it were, scatters himself on the waters, right? He says, unless the grain goes in the ground and dies, it won't bear fruit. And so on the cross, he does that very thing. And look at the life that has come from Jesus' death, from the scattering of his bread himself on the waters. Globally, I don't know, maybe we'll do this. I saw this thing, and I ordered it. It's a book, but it also has a, QR code or something where you can link to these videos, and they are believers all over the world worshiping different countries. And I thought, oh, man, that could be cool. We might do that we might have a little Sunday school or something, I don't know, where we watch these and you think globally, how many people are followers of Christ, have life because of his death? It's incredible. So that's the call here. Our philosophy as a church, this church, is that we're not here to build our little homestead kingdom. There's a big global kingdom of Jesus, and we're just one outpost. And so we want to give our best away for the sake of his kingdom and not stingily hang on to this for what we think is our purpose. Whether that's money, whether that's time, whether that's people. So here's a little thing. So this is about more than just money, but when it comes to that, let me just put this in front of you to pray about. 2 months, we have our annual meeting. We talk about budget. The purpose of budget is to talk about priorities in ministry. This is what's in the bank right now. Because of your generosity, we have $234,000 in the bank. And the Lord does not want us to dig a hole and bury it. Now, 80 some of that is designated to certain things already. Missions, fellowship fund, building maintenance, and a few things like that. But there's still over 150 that's just for whatever. So big picture kingdom framework for decision making. Be generous. Be generous. Number 2, be bold. Does this surprise you? That the Bible calls us to this? Err on the side of caution. There's a time for that, but there's a time that is very wrong, too. Verses 3 and 4. If the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth. If a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it will lie. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. Well, verse 4, the point is obvious. You're the farmer, and before we had, even now it's probably that way. We have weather reports, and sometimes they're pretty good, but you're looking at the clouds. Should I, shouldn't I, should I, shouldn't I, should I, shouldn't I, what should I do? And he paralyzed, locked up by waiting for the perfect time, right? You can overthink it. What's the point of verse 3? Where a tree falls, there it lies. I think the idea is just that, hey, there's things in this life that are not in our control. We don't control the rain, when and where. A tree in the woods is going to fall. We have no say about where that is, and that's where it's going to lie. The sovereign God is in control, and there's things we don't control. That's life. So, the saying, if you're waiting for the perfect time or waiting till you're ready to have kids, you'll never have kids, right? You could always be in a better financial position. You could always have better knowledge. You could always read another book or ask somebody else for more wisdom. If you're waiting for the perfect time to have kids, guess what? You'll never do it. So is it a pretty good time? Are you in a pretty good spot? Or is your home pretty stable? Then your husband and wife, go for it. See what God does. The marriage bed is undefiled. What do you say, babe? Let's see what God might do here. R.C. Sproul, Wayne reminded us, who knows that name? Well-known preacher. one of the better preachers of the last 50 years, became a follower of Christ because of verse 3. I have his biography here. And chapter 2, the top of the page, Ecclesiastes 11:3. So here's the story. You're going to love this. Kids, you're going to learn something new here, okay? Are you ready for this? So he's in college. He's from Pennsylvania, from Pittsburgh. And he goes to Westminster College, north of Pittsburgh, western Pennsylvania. And he has a roommate who was his best buddy growing up. So, and the roommate's name, and this buddy's name is Johnny. R.C. and Johnny were intending to head across the Allegheny River to Youngstown, Ohio. So they're going west across the Pennsylvania-Ohio border. A tough-as-nails city, Youngstown was notorious for its bars. R.C. Sproul's headed for the bar. All with a reputation for not checking IDs at the door, making it a favorite haunt for the underage undergrads of Westminster. As they got in the car, both Johnny and R.C. realized they were out of cigarettes. They hopped out and went back into the lobby of their dorm to get a pack of Lucky Strikes from the cigarette vending machine. Remember those? Them's was the good old days when you had a cigarette vending machine in your dorm room, kids. Did you know those existed? R.C.'s quarter dropped in the slot and the pack fell. Quarter, pack of Lucky Strikes out of the vending machine in college in the dorm room. How times have changed, have they not? As R.C. bent down to retrieve it, he saw two guys sitting at a table. They motioned for R.C. and Johnny to come join them. Hey, come here, you guys. R.C. recognized them instantly, one of them being the star of the football team. Of course, R.C. and Johnny obeyed the summons immediately. The two upperclassmen were hunched over a book. "What are you two doing?" the football star asked. Nothing," R.C. said, not about to confess their plans. So Johnny and R.C. were invited to sit and join them. The bars of Youngstown would have to wait. The two upperclassmen were engaged in a Bible study. R.C. had seen his dad read his Bible daily, but this was the first time R.C. ever witnessed a Bible study. The two upperclassmen talked about Christianity and the things of God and the Bible for well over an hour, all new territory for R.C. Then one of them turned the open Bible in R.C.'s direction, and he instructed R.C. to look at the book. It was Ecclesiastes 11:3. "If a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it will lie." It cut R.C. in two. He saw himself as that tree. He saw himself in a state of torpid paralysis, fallen, rotting, and decaying. I'm going to be dead on the ground like that tree. He left the table and returned to his dorm room. When he entered, he didn't turn on the light. He just knelt down beside his bed, praying to God, asking God to forgive his sins. R.C. never made it to Youngstown, Ohio that Friday night. God had other plans for his life. Ecclesiastes 11:3 is not the first verse one typically thinks of for evangelism. You ever use this in evangelism? R.C. would say, "I think I'm probably the only person in church history who was converted to Christ by that verse." Amazing story. Amazing what God can do. Casting the bread. So verse 5 continues this train of thought. "As you do not know the way the Spirit comes to the bones in the womb of a woman with child, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything." You know, for all our technology, medically, all the ultrasound stuff and all the things we can do, what happens in the womb is still an incredible wonder, an incredible mystery. Do we really understand what causes these cells to divide in such a way that organs are formed at such and such a time, that something becomes an ear and then a toe? How does that all happen? It is an incredible, wondrous mystery. And so too, he says, is the providence of God. So you do not know the work of God who makes everything. One of my favorite songs in the history of the church will always be this one. God moves. And when's the last time we sung this one? Do we still have this one in the catalog, Bob? Do you remember? This would be a good one to work back in. So, written by a guy named William Cooper, who was a friend of Amazing Grace, John Newton. And Cooper dealt with lifelong depression, severe, debilitating depression his whole life. And there's no SSRIs, no medications, none of that stuff. And so he's fighting his way through this, and the guy had a way with words. He was a poet. He had a way with language. And so he pens this poem that becomes a song. God moves in a mysterious way. You know, God works in mysterious ways, we say. His wonders to perform. He plants his footsteps in the sea and he rides upon the storm. Deep in the dark and hidden mines with never failing skill, he fashions all his bright designs and works his sovereign will. So in light of this, since so much is beyond us in life, he says in verse 6, hey, in the morning get up and sow your seed. In the evening don't withhold your hand. You don't know which will prosper, this or that. Maybe both alike will be good. Have you ever had, the perfect, I've got this well-laid plan. It's going to be foolproof. And the bottom fell out. Have you had that happen? And then there was this kind of half-cocked whatever, and it worked. It was like a Hail Mary, and it worked. You're like, you do not know which will prosper, so get up, do your work, live your life. Craig says, God, help me do the next right thing today. Walk by faith. So think about the fictional story we told at the beginning. Man 91 dies waiting for the will of God. Walter Houston, devoted Christian, died Monday after waiting 70 years for God to give him clear direction about what to do with his life. So here's a matrix for decision making for us as followers of Christ. We start always with the book, right? Scripture and the commands of God. There are things in here clearly stated as to what God's will is. His character, moral imperatives, do's and don'ts. We look there. Look at the end of the book. After all that's said in Ecclesiastes, the very last two verses of the whole book say, when it all boils down, it boils down to this. All has been heard, fear God and keep his commandments. This is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. So bottom line. So there's the character of God, the commands of God, when it comes to discerning his will and making decisions. There's prayer. We're not deists, right? For all his, get up and go, maybe some of us have a little too much get up and go sometimes. It's like hit the ground running. So there's a balance in this. Some of us maybe don't pray hardly about anything, and some of us, this would be a corrective if we're the paralysis of analysis person. It's like, okay, you've thought enough about it, get out there, So James 1:5, if any of you lacks wisdom, ask God, who gives stingingly, begrudgingly, who's been out of shape and annoyed that you're asking again. Generously, God gives generously to all who ask. Then there's wise counsel. Hey, what should I do? What do you think? This is what I'm thinking about. Where there's no guidance, a people fails. In abundance of counselors, there's safety. And then, if all those other things are there, the last thing we would say is, hey, what are you inclined to do? Which way do you want to go? So Augustine, the well-known theologian from church history, said this. He said, love God and do what you please. Now, at first glance, that can sound like, that sounds like a contemporary follow your dreams theology. I mean, God's here to fulfill your plan. Follow your heart. Do whatever. But that's not what he's saying, right? What's it start with? Love God. So we were running through this as a family, and Shepherd was like, what's the deal with the heart, with this fire coming out of the heart? What's the deal with this picture? The idea is that a heart aflame for God, that loves God, will want to do God's will want to please God. If we love God, we'll keep his commandments. And then our desires will be toward those things that please God as our Father. So 11:9 there, here in this chapter, it kind of brings us together. You see that? Rejoice, O young man or woman, in your youth. Let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of your eyes. But know that for all these things, God will bring you into judgment. So is what I'm about to do something I can stand before God with a good conscience? So how do you see God? When you think of God, how do you think of him? Do you think of God as a curmudgeon? Like this sour-faced, impossible to please Father? Looking over your shoulder always, just waiting for you to mess up so he can thump you in the ear and say, no, 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 no. Is that how we should think of God? That's the wrong way to think of God. Now, he's holy, and there's certain do's and don'ts for sure, but as children of God, redeemed by Christ, he is our Father, and he loves us, and there is, within the boundaries of his commands, there is great freedom and great joy. There's a lot of latitude in there. So, take a shot. Be bold. Go for it. Don't be afraid to quote unquote fail. I'm not talking about sin, but don't be afraid to quote unquote fail trying something new, because we're going to learn something. That's how we learn and how we grow. Cast your bread on the waters. There. What are you doing? Oh, what does verse 1 say? Cast it upon the waters, so you will find it in many days. Yeah. Here you go. The parable of the talents. Which servants are commended by the master? The master entrusts them with his resources. One of them does what? Digs a hole and buries it. Because why? I knew you were a cruel master and I was afraid. And what does the master say? You unfaithful servant. But the others, entrusted with his talent, go and trade, go and do business, my kingdom business. They get out there and they go for it, and they cast their bread, and a return comes back, and they are commended by the master. So what's God's will for you and me in matters not explicitly addressed by the commands of Scripture? 1, be generous. 2, be bold. Cast your bread upon the waters. So, final song, Bob. Pick this one. It seems to go well with this. Remember this verse? Paul says, by the grace of God, I am what I am. Who made me what I am? Who made Paul, gave him the gifts, gave him the drive? By his grace I am what I am, and his grace toward me was not in vain. On the contrary, I worked harder than any of them, than the other apostles. He's out there going for it. He's got ministry dreams and goals, and he's out there going for it, casting the bread. Though it was not I, but the grace of God that was with me. It was yet not I, but Christ in me. So that's what we're going to sing. Will you guys stand? Is that all right? Let's stand. Let's sing that song.